Welcome everybody to the UKGN Podcast and the second week of our month-long celebration of sport. I'm Zoidberg. It's the British Grand Prix this weekend, so for this show we turn our attention to the world of motorsport, and specifically Formula 1. Ever since I started playing games, I've played F1 races, starting with Checkered Flag on the Spectrum right the way through to Codemasters' just released F1 2019. I've played that many that I probably know all the corners around Spa, Suzuka and Silverstone better than I know my morning commute. A quest for realism has been a common thread connecting all the games, but in the 80s this didn't really extend beyond making sure that the cars and tracks looked right in the menus. Then, in 1992, along came Jeff Crammond with Formula 1 Grand Prix for the Amiga, ST and PC, which was the first game to use full 3D graphics and for the first time an unprecedented recreation of all 16 circuits from the F1 calendar. This opened the floodgates for more and more similar games, but the next significant release wouldn't come until the arrival of the PlayStation, and Bizarre Creations Formula 1, which brought the official FIA license to Sony. This meant that they could include all 13 teams in accurately modelled cars from the 95 season, and even draft in Murray Walker to provide in-race commentary. Sony would go on to make yearly entries in the series, even fending off EA who tried to muscle in with their own games in the early 2000s. This took them all the way until the PS3 release in 2006, and gamers wondered who would take up the license next. Codemasters were announced as the new home in 2008, meaning that the games could finally come out on other consoles as well, and the first release was F1 2009 for the Wii, which utilised motion controls for the steering. Each subsequent release has added features such as changing weather, DRS and in-car development, and the latest release is simply one of the best racing games ever made. If realism isn't your thing, and you want something that you can just pick up and play, there has also been a long history of more accessible races to tap into the glitz and glamour of F1. Here are 5 arcade-style F1 games that you should definitely play. Taito's Continental Circus was one of the earliest examples of 3D in gaming, with arcade cabinets featuring a pair of glasses for you to wear as you played. When cars exploded, the debris was thrown directly at you, and in 1989 we'd never seen anything like it. The game itself is a pure arcade racer, where you drive a recreation of Ayrton Senna's 1987 Golden Lotus. You start off in 100th position, and the aim is to reach the front across a number of circuits, beginning with Interlagos in Brazil. There are also checkpoints and a pretty challenging time limit to conquer. A single error could mean that you won't make the next one. It was also unique in featuring pit stops for tyres when the weather changed on later tracks. Collisions would also require a quick stop in the pits to prevent an explosion. None of the home conversions were up to much. The arcade original remains a firm favourite. Released as part of Team 17's budget range, F17 Challenge had more than an element of Lotus Turbo Challenge about its gameplay, but that's no bad thing. Racing as part of a full lineup of 22 cars, arcade mode required you to finish in the top 3 in order to progress to the next track. Keep an eye on your damage meter is important as you race, as if it got above 80% you'd lose speed, and 100% would result in an instant failure. As it was a budget game, none of the tracks or drivers were given their real names, but you could edit them in the options if you wanted to, and the game offered you a choice of car colours to replicate the real world. The lack of a split-screen 2-player option was also a disappointment, but that doesn't mean it's not worth playing. Exhaust Heat, or F1 Race of Champions as it was known in North America, used the Mode 7 capabilities of the SNES to great effect, and was clearly inspired by F-Zero. A full season of 16 tracks is available to race, and you'll get to play all of them regardless of where you finish in the race. The incentive to finish higher, in addition to a natural winner's mentality, was that you'd get more prize money to spend on upgrades, and being able to test these before purchase was a nice touch. For some reason the player's car appears to be about 20% smaller than the rest of the field, something which always bugged us back in the day. The sequel, released a year later, made a number of changes to the gameplay, but mostly they were for the worse. It may have a silly name, but Lancor's Vroom was quite simply the fastest 3D racer ever released for the Atari ST and Amiga. By limiting the trackside detail, it really was blisteringly quick, and the excellent sound design helped to sell the illusion. Rather than race against the clock, your goal is to overtake as many cars as possible before the end of the 5 laps. Pass enough of them and you're off to the next track. Fail and it's game over. Significantly, it also offers a choice of mouse as well as joystick control, and this makes the steering feel much smoother. It led to Domark republishing the game a couple of years later for the Mega Drive, with the official FIA license and renaming it as simply F1. Don't confuse it with F1 World Championship Edition, which was released the following year, as that was a different developer and nowhere near as good. No list of great arcade racers would be complete without an entry from Sega, and Super Monaco Grand Prix wowed arcade patrons the world over with its high-speed action and focused gameplay. The graphics were based on the same sprite scaling technology that had brought us Power Drift the year before, but the result here was far more satisfying. Home conversions naturally followed the arcade success, with both Mega Drive and Amiga getting notable releases of their own. These versions added extra tracks, as the arcade original featured just the one, and made sensible changes that suited the systems that they were on. As good as these were though, nothing quite matches the arcade original for sheer fun. This top 5 is entirely subjective and merely our opinion. We don't claim to have played everything, so tell us where we went wrong in the comments. Now though, it's time for the news. There have been a few announcements this week from Nintendo, so we thought we'd bundle them all together. First up was the reveal of the Nintendo Switch Lite, which will be coming out in September. It's a slightly smaller, more handheld focused version of the regular Switch console, and it's made a few small but significant changes to the console. It now has a proper D-pad on the left of the screen, which should allow for better control on games that use it, but it can no longer connect to a TV and the HD rumble has been removed. As for the price, it's listed as $200 on the trailer, but a UK price is yet to be revealed, although Amazon currently have it listed for $199. You should probably wait a bit before pre-ordering. On the gaming front, it was announced this week that Tetris 99, the excellent Battle Royale version of the classic puzzler, will be available in a physical release in September also. Again, there's no official price, but the boxed copy will include the 2 paid DLC packs, which are $8.99 each on the eShop, and a full 12-month subscription to the Nintendo Online service, which can currently be picked up for $14.99. Tetris 99 will be released on the same day as the Switch Lite, September the 20th. The Nintendo Online game library is expanding again next week, with the addition of 2 more classic NES titles. Donkey Kong 3, more of a shooter than previous series entries, and a UKGN favourite, and Wrecking Crew, which sees Mario and Luigi ditch the plumbing in favour of demolition, will both be available from July 17th. The same day will also see the introduction of a new rewind feature for all the games on the service, allowing you to undo any silly mistakes. How you feel about this feature will depend on what type of retro gamer you are. Personally, we pour scorn on the idea, as it stops you from having to get good. Now we move on to the new games that we've played in the last 7 days. Sea of Solitude is the latest indie game to be released under the EA Originals banner, following on from Unravel and A Way Out. It sits comfortably in the same subgenre of platform games as Limbo, Little Nightmares and Rime, although it's never quite as good as it could have been during the 6 hours it takes to finish. Visually, it's a treat, with a well-presented city, great use of colour and some nice creature design. What lets it down is the gameplay itself, which never feels as though it flows like it should, and the combat is clunky and confusing. There are some impressive standout platforming sequences that show what a more focused game could have been, but these are too few and far between, and only serve to make the game even more disappointing. It's definitely worth playing through once, but it's not something that you'll happily return to a few years down the line like its contemporaries. We all have our weaknesses for specific types of games, and one of mine is definitely run and gun shooters. Blazing Chrome is no filler release though. It's easily the best I've played since Hardcore Uprising on the Xbox 360, and it's absolutely going to appeal to anyone who's craving a bit of Contra-style action. It's clear from the offset that the developers know their inspiration inside out, so perfectly does it emulate the look and feel of the SNES era. You get 4 levels to choose from that can be played in any order, either on your own or in 2-player co-op, and it offers a nice variety of locations. The action is frantic, but it never feels impossible, and it's broken up with a series of well-designed bosses to fight. Xbox owners can download it as part of Game Pass, but the low price on other systems means that it's an essential purchase. It's perhaps fitting that Stranger Things 3 brings back more memories about playing games in the 80s than the developers intended, reminding us of the time when every popular movie or TV show got a forgettable game tie-in. This is at least better than most, as the 16-bit recreations of familiar scenes, characters and locations are nicely realised with a decent attention to detail. There are a lot of playable characters as you progress, and each has their own special set of skills, but there's not enough variety to the missions or general gameplay. Even the most avid Stranger Things fan will be hard-pressed to remain interested for the duration. You should also be aware that it follows the plot of the series pretty much to the letter, so if you haven't already watched it, you shouldn't play this until afterwards. In fairness, that is probably the point though. Been out a while now, but this week My Time of Portia arrived on Game Pass, meaning that we were finally able to give it a go. As big fans of Stardew Valley, the idea of a full 3D version combined with elements of Minecraft, Animal Crossing and Harvest Moon made it something that we were looking forward to playing. Sadly, it was not worth the wait. It looks quite nice, and whenever you spend time in the main town it's okay, but whenever you venture out, it feels incredibly cheap and takes too long to get anywhere. It's little more than a mobile game at times. Go underground and it gets even worse. The mining system is simply terrible, and not even the slightest bit fun. Ultimately, it has none of the charm of the games that inspired it, so why even bother? Now we come to our retro game of the week, and in keeping with this week's theme, we've gone for Atari's Super Sprint, which we decided to not include in our top 5 as it's not technically an F1 game. First appearing in the arcade in 1986, this single-screen racer allowed for up to 3 players to race against each other, with a 4th opponent controlled by the computer. You pick one of 8 tracks and keep racing them in turn until you finish behind the AI. Collecting on-track spanners would allow you to unlock upgrades for your car, and it just keeps getting faster and faster until you fail. The simplicity of it all makes it so that anyone can play, and kept it so that games were ultra competitive. It was brilliant in the arcades, but it was also probably the game we played the most on the Atari ST, thanks to a fantastic conversion by Atari themselves. We got to the point where we were able to loop the tracks many times over and completely max out the upgrades. There's never been a single screen racing game that's come close to matching it. And that's the end of the show for this week. We hope you enjoyed it. If we've inspired you to play one of the games that we've talked about, or if you want to share your memories of playing F1 games, please let us know in the comments. We'll be back next week with another podcast where we'll be looking at the best multi-event sports games ever. Tune in to see what they are. Until then, I'm Zoidberg for UK Gaming Network. Bye for now.